Okay, today, folks, we're going to expose the Russian hoax that was not a hoax. It's been in effect and constantly becoming more entangled within American corporations, the American White House, and it's about money. It's really as simple as that. Can you imagine that? So we're going to expose that to the degree it needs to be exposed. I can do more elaborate details as to the root of the matter, but let's deal with this here. Let's go to our main screen. We got this wonderful gentleman, combat veteran, also has some education, believe it or not. And 19 hours ago, and today is December 20th, did Putin just wire Trump $1 billion? Can you imagine that? Let's see what he has to say.
Did the Russian government just funnel billions of dollars to Donald Trump and his family? If you follow the news closely, you might have noticed that a strange story popped up about Donald Trump's company. But when you peel back the layers of the onions, you see everyone starts speaking Russian. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran, and I'm going to lay out the evidence that there is something strange perhaps going on inside of the Trump Media Group's merger with a fusion energy company. Now, before we get started, I want to make a couple of caveats. The first, why should you listen to me? Because not only am I a U.S. Army veteran, but when I left, I went to grad school at Johns Hopkins where I studied international relations and economics. So I actually have a little bit of expertise in this domain. But also, I want to say that I'm going to lay out the evidence so that I don't get sued. I'm not making any allegations of anything. I'm just going to show you guys some evidence, and conclusions that you draw are your own. All I'm doing is asking questions. Okay, let's get into it. Now, here's the headline. Pretty simple stuff. Trump Media Group, that is the company that owns Truth Social, is merging with a fusion reactor company. That is not a typical move here, because generally when companies merge, they tend to either do so for synergistic business reasons, i.e. they say, listen, if you're if you're Amazon, an online marketplace, and you merge with a delivery company, right, that makes sense. You guys can help each other. Or you say, I'm a fusion company. I built a fusion reactor. Here's another company that's also building a fusion reactor. Let's combine our efforts and become more efficient. Those are generally the two reasons companies merge.
That is generally the way things are going, and that's normally the natural course of business. But nonetheless, what we need to remember is you need to follow the money. Just follow the money.
Merge. A social media company and a fusion power generation company really doesn't make any sense on the surface. Now, explicitly, the reasoning is that the TAE Technologies, that's the fusion energy company based here in the U.S., officially they say it's because Trump Media and Technology Group is going to give us access to the White House in a way that no other company will. Now, right there, that should be like, in any other country, that would be seen as problematic. And the fact that that is actually...
Yeah, but here's the deal, folks. The National Security Strategy of November 2025, where it targets Europe, allows Russia to get away with whatever Russia wants to get away with. And this is where it's really tragic. The fact that human lives are being wasted by the Russian government and then further exerting their will upon the Ukrainian people, and more lives being wasted. And everybody's turning a blind eye to that. And then you have Venezuela, power boats being blown up, chasing fentanyl that doesn't come through that route, but that's the excuse being used, and the Emergency Powers Act subsequently being used for tariffs and for blowing up power boats in the Caribbean, and trying to overtake a guy by the name of Maduro in Venezuela to protect the interests of a company called Chevron. Can you imagine that? Chevron. It doesn't get any more convoluted than that, but the entanglements are much deeper than that.
The legitimate excuse layered on top of even more potential corruption is kind of insane. So let me show you guys what bothers me about this. First off, the coverage is just like, ooh, is fusion the future? Okay, probably not, unfortunately. We've been, for the past 30 years, we've been trying to make fusion profitable, and it just hasn't happened, right? And so I want to lay out these two companies to understand how incredibly bizarre it is that this merger is happening in the first place. One, it's because it is funded by TAE Technologies. They are the ones actually bringing cash and actually funding from unnamed other sources into this deal. So nobody really knows who TAE went to generate the funds to make this happen. And the reason it's so sus is because TAE Technologies, guys, has never sold anything. In 27 years, they have never actually created a monetizable product.
But here's something you should know, and this relates to me personally. This company was founded based on this organ in 1998. I was targeted in March, beginning of March 1998, because of what I knew about the Russian money laundering scheme that created the Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, and Pandora Papers. As a matter of fact, I was married to the youngest daughter of a guy that is on the record. His name is on the record, or was on the record of the Duma between 2005 and 2009. Might have been scrubbed by now, because a lot of these companies, they do mergers, they dissolve these companies so that the paper trail gets lost because it dissolves with the dissolved company. But nonetheless, in or about 2009, a guy by the name of Kuznetsov was actually hired by or engaged by Putin to actually find out, bring to the surface corruption in the Duma. But he got so close to the truth, he ended up going to Siberia. Yeah, he's another guy that did one of those 9-year tenors, maybe a few, and just disappeared. Also, what you should be aware of, the father of the daughter I was married to was laundering up to 4 trillion rubles within 1 month, which was 97 billion Canadian dollars in 1 month. It's a lot of money, folks. There's a lot at stake here. And this started, the groundwork, the foundation was laid in 1992. But we're going to find out other things here.
They say death.
Oh, and I forgot to mention, a Dutch criminal investigative journalist by the name of Oki Ornstein was actually falsely accused and put in jail in Panama because he was such a thorn in people's sides. Preet Bharara, former Attorney General of the United States of America, actually put a guy by the name of David Guzman in jail because Guzman was the front for the Colombian drug cartel. Can you imagine that? A Trump building in Panama, Trump knowingly knowing this, was laundering money also for a Colombian drug cartel, and now we have this exertion of will. They claim it's for other things, but the story is much deeper than that. The former president of Panama, a guy by the name of Martinelli, is actually maybe in jail, was a good friend of Donald Trump's. Get back to the video.
Definitely, guys, for sure by 2030, right? We're totally going to have it all ready to go. It's tough to believe that because, again, they've said that every single year for like the past 15 years, that they're just 2 years away, dudes, just 2 years away. We just got to solve a couple of problems in theoretical physics, and then it is smooth sailing, okay? So how can a company exist for 30 years and never make a dollar? That's already kind of weird. But even stranger, you ask yourself, how can a company that's never made $1 in 30 years find the money to buy Trump Media Group? Now, to be clear, Trump Media Group shouldn't really be worth all that much by itself. Why? Because it is a failing social media platform whose earnings per share is negative 42 cents. Okay, they have never turned a profit. They are never close to profitability, and yet somehow they are trading at insane price to earn. I mean, there is no price to earnings ratio, right? It literally is like blank because, well, there's no earnings, right? The earnings are negative, so it doesn't make any sense. It is an unprofitable company. But here's where things get even more preposterous. You can see that literally it was trading at around $10, $11 a share, right? With very, very, very low volume. And you can see that as soon as they announced they were getting acquired by this fusion company, that the shares shot up 60%, going from literally $10 a share to 16. And for the shareholders, that changes the value of the company. It went from about $2 billion to about $4 billion, maybe 2.5 to 4. An absolutely insane jump, literally putting billions of dollars in the pockets of the shareholders, which are primarily, of course, Donald Trump and his family. Now, we just saw that this is a boon to the administration. But you got to ask yourself, where's TAE Technologies gotten this money? And who's really behind this company? Now, it's really hard to find this. Who has provided the funding to keep this company going for 30 years? And you can see recently that answer has been...
So you see Chevron Technologies. What's that, 160 million, 150 million? And then 3 years prior, another 250 million. And then another prior to that, 2021, Google, 250 million. And prior to that, in 2016, when Trump first got into power, Alphabet, which is just part of Google, 375 million. So, as I said, follow the money. Chevron, oil in Venezuela before. Now Trump says, well, Venezuela stole our rights. Well, I think Chevron did a friggin' a squat a long time ago and exerted their will untowards on Venezuela for the benefit of Chevron, but that's neither here nor there. But here you see Chevron, Google, and Alphabet. They've got major investments. So now they're manipulated. They don't want to lose their investments. Money has power. But the factor that you must consider is corporations have no moral consciousness to the general public nor to the environment. They are driven strictly by profits. And this is what you have to understand.
The startups of major companies, Fortune 500 companies. Chevron and Google coughing up 150 million, 250 million coming from Chevron and Google, right? 300 million coming from Google and New Enterprise Associates, 375 coming from Google, and another trust company. But here's where things get kind of weird. You could see that these big name investments, big money investments started in about 2016. Prior to 2016, the investments look very different. You can see when shortly after they were founded, they were getting 2 million, 4 million, 1 million, 6 million, a big $40 million tranche, right?
But here's the other thing. This 6 million, 40 million, you notice that's Vulcan Capital. And Vulcan was originally a company that was started by one of the co-founders of Microsoft, a guy by the name of Paul Allen. And then you see Venrock Associates. Well, Venrock, maybe I got it backwards. Is Venrock part of the Rockefeller Foundation? I've got it. So don't worry, we'll get back to that.
But still small potatoes compared to what they were making before. You can see in 2007, they got 40 and 50 million. And then something crazy happened. Someone, right, Russ Nano, dropped in $127 million. Almost more funding.
Yeah, but here's the other thing. He's talking about Rosnano, which is actually the Russian government, believe it or not, the Russian government. But Blue Sky Partners, California venture capital firm, they got their hands in SpaceX, TAE, and who else? And you see Goldman Sachs earlier had done some investment capital in there. Where that came from, we don't know. Just like Deutsche Bank, that during the Manhattan trial that Trump got charged, bona fide charged, for violations. But Deutsche Bank is a major conduit for Russian laundered money. All this stuff has been covered up, and people just don't realize it.
Than they had gotten up until that point in a Series D funding. Now, think about it like this. Imagine you are Rosnano, right? This company that invested. Rosnano drops a ton of money into a company that up until this point, in the first 13 years they existed, they raised $127 million. And Rosnano says, listen, we'll give you all of that. So you can imagine Rosnano probably acquired a major stake in this company. They might have even acquired a majority ownership of it, right? So let's say, for the sake of argument.
Yeah, but you have to know, with Rosnano, you've got Blue Sky Partners here, and I'll explain how that relationship plays out.
They represent, at that point, they represent 40% of all the funding they've done. So let's say, for $127 million, let's say they became 35% of the company. Well, guys, what is Rosnano? Well, lads, Rosnano is the Russian government. Rosnano is a government investment arm by the Russian government that invests in electronics, telecom, renewable energy, healthcare, biotech, metallurgy, and chemistry, right? Literally, personally authorized by Vladimir Putin himself in 2007, whose goal it was to grow the Russian high-tech technology company. I want to point out that as of 2017, 100% of shares of Rosnano were owned by the Russian government. So any company that Rosnano invested in and acquired an ownership stake of, that ownership stake is literally a pipeline, straight, no variations, to the Kremlin, right? And you can see here that when you look at the portfolio of Rosnano companies, you can see that TAE Technology shows up actually several times. And again, they are certainly not the only one, but they are one of the highest searched for and highest ranking companies that they've used. And this is not, right, a smoking gun. None of the things you're going to see is. But what we do now know is that a company that has just delivered substantial profits to Trump Technology Group, well, that they are at least partially owned by the Russian government. But their ties to the Russian government go even deeper because, right, they are making, well, you can see here. Here's TAE Technologies Wikipedia. You can see the funding, of course, has come through Rosnano, invested in Tri-Alpha, and for a time, a Russian oligarch was actually...
So the early investors, as you see, Paul Allen's Vulcan and Rockefeller family's Venrock. So Rockefeller's old family establishment, America. Paul Allen, slightly newer, Microsoft. And then you've seen Chevron, which has been in the oil and gas sector for a long, long time, well established there. And Google and Alphabet. So the corporations, the American corporations, have a huge foothold financially in this enterprise, in this White House, and with Russia. And because of money, it's more important than serving the people of the United States. And this is the reality of things that you must understand.
Literally a board member, Antonelli Chubais. But there's even more to it than that. When you look at some of their technology development, you can see that they have frequently collaborated with the Russian government on their nuclear technologies. Let's see if we can find it here. Here's one article, right, from 2017 that shows that when the European ITAR, essentially the European Nuclear Physics research arm that does a lot of these fusion reactor research, went to visit their Russian branch, they said, look, it's Tri-Alpha Energy, which later became TAE Technologies.
TAE.
And they were showing off to the Europeans this joint negative ion neutral injection plasma heating system in development in the Russian Federation with Tri-Alpha. And again, I'm going to try to find it here because there's buried in here is another reference to so much of this research that has taken place. Here we go.
The Whigtory Institute.
Literally, a nuclear physics research institute in Russia built an injector and then sent it straight to TAE's research facility, which is crazy, right? Because that actually 2013 is the year that Rusnano took a stake. So Rusnano buys a share of the company. The Russian government buys a share of the company. And then a Russian nuclear physics research institute literally mails it a incredibly powerful neutral
to
beam,
the U.S.
A key component of their fusion system, right? You see how sus this is starting to sound? You see how deep these kind of ties go? And so again, here's what I want to point out. I think TAE is probably really doing nuclear physics research. But if you're Rusnano, this was a hugely valuable investment. Because remember, in the world of venture capital, if you get in on the ground floor, imagine you're Rusnano, right? And you take this 35% stake in TAE. Well, 2 years later, Google says, well, we want to buy a stake in this, and we'll pay up to $250 million. And then the next year, then 2 years later, Google and Chevron come back, and we say, well...
Hold on, buddy, hold on. It's not about this. This is the wrong rabbit hole to be going down. What it is power and manipulation. Countries being taken over by corporations and the ideologies of their leaders. And the leader in the States is Donald Trump, and the leader of Russia is a guy by the name of Vladimir Putin. And this is why you have the national security strategy of November 2025, where they're trying to break up NATO, trying to break up the EU, so that Russia can dominate Europe. The money trail leads right to American companies. American companies have no conscience whatsoever to the people of the United States, to the planet and the environment. All it has is a modus operandi of making profits. It's just driven strictly by money. It doesn't care about anything else. And this is what you have to understand. So now, where are we going to go with this? Vulcan Capital, Paul Allen. He's deceased, but they were the early investors in this. Vulcan Capital, closed and active, but there are branches of it still existing right now, and to what degree I can't verify or state. Venrock, the Rockefeller family, goes back to the 1930s. Palo Alto, California, founded in 1969. Palo Alto, build the future. And then we got Big Sky. And here's where Big Sky, you see it right here now, TAE Technologies, TAE Life Sciences, SpaceX, Elon Musk, and various other companies. So the Russian money trail, and this company is located in California, the Russian money trail has taken over the White House in coordination with a guy by the name of Donald J. Trump. You just don't get it. And the American companies that were there at his second inauguration are all part of this takeover, trying to take over the world for their own means. Doesn't have to be that way. Actually, there's a very simple way of doing things differently so that everybody can benefit. Nobody has to get hurt by invading countries, blowing up boats, killing people in these friggin' made-for-profit wars that serves no one. Doesn't have to be that way. But they will try and convince you differently. So, folks, you really have to wake up and understand that the people are the pawns. That big, beautiful bill benefited the corporations. There's a stipend that was included in that big, beautiful bill, which Trump is now touting as the 1776. Amazing how Confederation comes back into play, and how a guy by the name of Alito, a Supreme Court justice, waving the Confederation flag at his vacation property. So the signs are there. The people got to rise up. You don't need to bear arms. You don't need to have violence. You need to express your voice, get your voice in a position where you take out the people that are manipulating you, taking advantage of you, hurting people, and do things differently. You have the free will to do that. So, without further ado, questions, comments, throw in the chat. Love and peace to everyone. Talk to you all soon. Ciao for now. Canada, the U.S., two countries, totally different politics, but we share a border, a media space, and a lot of